Hi, welcome to another video on multidimensional living. Before I begin, because I want to kind of talk about some more far out there stuff in this video. But before beginning, just take a moment to allow yourself to arrive to what is your internal home base. Just the place you land when you move to go inside and settle. In that place, and see if this is in your awareness, there is a steadiness that's never disturbed. And there also is a deep, abiding quiet. And that quiet also is never disturbed and can become a beautiful place of just refuge, just a place to take a breath and find yourself. We live in such a busy world that having that internal home base can really be a beautiful resource. And so for this time, I want to talk about some experiences that I've had that speak to a larger multidimensional context of reality. And they may seem unlikely and, oh my gosh, what are you talking about? But I think for some of you, they might not be so far out there. They might be more along the lines of things you might have experienced or heard people talk about. They have to do really with the idea, kind of the more quantum idea that reality is bigger than we perceive, and it has rules that go well beyond our Western scientific perspective on what's possible. So the first experience I'd like to talk about, by the way, just to say, I've said this before on other videos, but I was raised in a home with a grandmother who was very multidimensional herself. She worked with nature spirits. She was a healer. So the world I grew up in was always populated by more than just the visible realms. I'm not perceptive the way she was, but she could see what was around and she would describe it. So I have all of those experiences in my awareness. So when I run into a multidimensional experience, I tend to have a context in which to plant it, whether it's accurate and real or not. So the first thing I'd like to share is many years ago, I was living in the Berkshires in Massachusetts, and a colleague of mine had a fairy circle that lived on the mountain behind her home. And one day she invited me to climb the path up the mountain to experience the fairy circle. I said, okay, I had no idea what to experience. And it was really fascinating. I've never forgot it. My body can still feel it. But when we got to the fairy circle, which was just there was a large boulder with a kind of clear area around it amongst many, many trees. We were on a mountain. I stepped into this fairy circle, and all of a sudden, all these little fingers were brushing up my cheeks, countless little hands with fingers. I couldn't see them, but my body absolutely felt them. And the things I felt, other than their physical presence and the sensations on my face, was their delight at having this woman visit. I said, wow, these fairies really like you. They're pretty excited. And we just spent a little bit of time there greeting these fairies I couldn't see, nature spirits that I couldn't physically perceive, but wow, I certainly felt them. And I've never forgotten that. Many, many, many years later, it comes back to me vividly. So when I hear people talk about nature spirits they might be interacting with, or nature spirits they see in Central Park. I can't perceive them, but I believe that they are there. In fact, I have another friend in Iceland who used to be in charge of something called the Elf Garden. I think it was the Elf Garden outside Reykjavik. And for her, I guess for a lot of people in Iceland, elves and nature spirits are just taken as part of the natural landscape. So that was one experience, and that one really matched my childhood. So it didn't throw me. I didn't have any weirdness from it. But then in recent times, a couple of years ago, I was in Central Park. Now, one thing I've been doing is reading a good bit about popularized quantum physics, because I'm wanting to challenge my linear brain so that I'm not caught in our time-space limited perspective. So I have been dancing around in that arena of concepts in recent years. Actually, I've been reading about popularized quantum stuff for my whole adult life, but I've been more serious about it in recent years. So I was walking in Central Park. I do that as often as possible. And I was walking off path. I don't think I've mentioned this in another video. I was walking off path, and I was just beginning to bless the trees. I'll do that often when I'm in Central Park, just as I'm walking along. And I was on the dirt, walking on a kind of raised area. For those of you who know Central Park, the Great Lawn was over there. The Metropolitan Museum was over there, and I was in an area in between, but up off the paths. And I was just starting the blessing to the trees around me when I took a step, a regular step, just one step forward. But I completed that step down on the pathway in front of the Great Lawn, a good bit behind where I was. And when I finished that step, I was really disoriented. I couldn't tell where I was for a minute. And then I got my bearings and I went back to where I had been and was going to continue on my way. But I was absolutely gobsmacked, as they would say in Britain. I could not believe that I had been transported from one spot to another in one step. It was one instantaneous transporting. Now, I've certainly read about people who've been transported. I have read about it as a possibility. I don't think I ever really seriously took it as a viable experience for anything I would ever have. And my main response was, whoever did that, please don't do that again. And thank you for putting me somewhere close to where I started out and not somewhere that I didn't even know where I was. It felt a little vulnerable, and it blew my mind. It really kind of blew my perceptions open, in the sense that I know I didn't make that up. You know how when you have a personal experience, you know you're not making it up. Someone else might say, oh yeah, well, it must have been a blah, blah, or a blah. No, nope. I took one step one place, started a step one place, ended it in quite a different geographical location, thankfully in the same area. So what that got me to thinking about is to really be open to the possibilities of the rules of science, the way we've been taught them, aren't the only rules around. I kind of relate this to a not uncommon experience that we all know about, which are things like spontaneous healings. That just how can that happen? For those of you who have read Anita Morjani's book, you know that she was in the hospital dying from lymphoma, in a coma. The family had been called because she was on her last leg. She had a near-death experience. She came back, and over a course of, I don't remember how many weeks, she was completely healed. Now, we don't have a way to explain that in regular linear science terms. But I just want to invite you, the reason I wanted to record this, I just want to invite you to be aware. You probably already are, or you probably wouldn't be watching these videos, but to be aware that there's a much larger reality we participate in than we realize consciously, or that our science acknowledges. Things are possible that we have been taught aren't. So I just wanted to offer this brief period of time to share these experiences, to say, not only to open up your own sense of possibilities, but there are interesting books and talks out there of people who've had these kinds of experiences. And fortunately, I think a good number of us are fairly grounded people. We're sort of like living regular lives, but a larger reality makes itself known. And I think that when we prime our mind and our thinking toward what might be possible, I think it actually becomes easier to experience it. I think it becomes easier to take in anomalous experiences when we have a framework internally that says, no, this three-dimensional physical world is not it. It's one way that reality expresses, but it's certainly not it. So I'll have more to say along these lines in coming videos, because I really want to share some of the ways in which I interact with a larger reality in what I think, you may not agree, but what I think is a very grounded way. So for now, that's about all I have to share this time. And until next time, I wish you well.